Fuse Audio Labs is known for developing plugins that bring warmth and analog goodness to in-the-box mixing, and Flywheel is no exception. If you want to give this tape plugin a spin, then join me for this episode of I Don't Have a Band, right now. Hey there, I'm Dan, the self-proclaimed lonely rocker. Welcome to this episode of I Don't Have a Band. If you love home studios and recording, well, you've come to the right place. I've made it a point to get my hands on as much gear and software as I can and deliver videos to help hopefully make your home studio life better. So thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be taking a look at a plugin from Fuse Audio Labs. I became a huge fan of Fuse this year. I had a pleasure of reviewing one of their products earlier this year. And I also got to know the founder and owner of Fuse Audio Labs, Ray, who I featured in a full-length interview. I'll put a link to that video in the description below so you can check it out after you've watched this one. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Flywheel. Flywheel is a tape saturation plugin, but unlike other tape saturation plugins, this is not based on any particular piece of hardware. What Ray has done, he's collected all of those, what I call beautiful imperfections that tape provides, and put them all into one zero latency plugin that's really light on CPU load. I've talked about saturation before. Next to EQ and compression, it's just a type of plugin that just makes its way on all of my tracks and definitely my master bus. Tape does something that EQ just can't do. It brings a certain quality, and I really think you can never have enough saturation options in your toolbox. Fuse is known for their analog emulation goodness, and Flywheel is no exception. So what we're going to do, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to give you an overview of the plugin, and then I'll give you a couple of samples so you can hear what it can do. All right, let's jump in and take a look at Flywheel from Fuse Audio Labs. Depending how old you are, whether or not you've had experience working with analog equipment, sort of the promises of the advent of digital technology was that it was going to clean up all of those imperfections and all the unpredictable moments and things you would get out of analog equipment. But fast forward many years later, people realized that a lot of those imperfections actually created that quality and sound that was desirable for many people. So in the digital world, we can now emulate some of those imperfections, and that's where a tape plugin comes in. All of those, like I said, beautiful, unpredictable moments that just don't happen in digital, we can actually control all of those different parameters, and that's what Flywheel is all about. So let's just walk through the different knobs and switches here, so to give you an idea of what's included in the plugin and how it works. Let's start with the techie stuff first. We've got two settings here, that's Hist and HFEQ. Hist stands for Hysteresis. Now, if I understand this correctly, during the process of recording, there's a frequency loss sort of in the higher registers, plus it introduces some distortion. So with the Hist setting, you can introduce some of these effects. Let's take a listen to it. So you can hear how it starts to roll off that top end. Now, that's something a tape machine would do by default, but you can introduce that into your signal to taste. So if you're finding it a little harsh or a little top endy, you want to kind of warm it up a little bit, you can roll that off. And that's also bringing in some nice pleasing distortion, or a lot of distortion if you want to put more in there. HFEQ is similar effect, but happens during the playback, something to do with the playback head. So again, if you keep that at 0, it's a little more subtle, but I find that the two parameters work well together. And more than likely, you'll be spending most of your time in the plugin between these two knobs. Speed variance, tape machines were imperfect. So you can think about wow, flutter, all the imperfections of playback. If it's not running at 100% speed, there's a little bit of a variance there. So again, I'll just give you an example here. So if you're feeling a little drunk and you want to introduce some of that, you can. What I find is just a couple percent. Again, it's sort of that little unpredictability that you want to add to the signal. If you just want to add a little touch of that couple percent, I find adds a nice little quality. You're not really feeling that sort of warbling effect, but just bringing a nice little quality to your tone. The record gain is really how you're going to be introducing distortion into the signal. And what's nice about this feature here is that it is compensated. So no matter how hard you drive it, you're not going to blow your speakers or blow your eardrums, in my case, wearing headphones. So again, I'll give you an example here. Let's put it down to -24. So you can see the harder I drive it, the more distortion I'm bringing into the signal, but it's really not affecting the output volume of the plugin. That's great. So you can just go to town on that knob, find, if you're looking for a real lo-fi sound, a lot of distortion, just crank it up. You don't have to worry about your levels because it is compensated. And then the playback gain really is the opposite effect. That's the output gain of the plugin. If you've got some volume loss, let's say you've rolled off some EQ, you want to bring a little volume back, you can dial up playback gain. So again, I'll take a listen. So this plugin really will work well as a gain stage. Often I use tape saturation plugins early in the chain. I'm just thinking logically, if I was recording something in a studio, my instrument, let's say it goes through an amp, then it hits the tape machine, and then post-processing after that. So I often put my tape plugins early in the chain. So again, perfect opportunity to use this plugin as a gain stage as well. So you can control the output volume of that plugin. VU, simply you can monitor the input signal or the output signal. It's good to balance, get your levels coming into the plugin properly and make sure they're going out not too hot so you can switch between the two. Tape machine technology, the slower the tape is spinning while recording, the lower the quality. So faster the tape speed, the better quality. Obviously, in this case, we're not losing any quality, whether you're at 15 IPS, some people say IPS, or 30 IPS. But if you're going for a more low fidelity sound, then you would put it into 15 IPS. And but if you're looking for something a little bit more cleaner and stable, then you would look at 30. The crosstalk setting, if you're using the plugin on a stereo track, there can be a little bleed between the left and right channel. According to the manual, that happens around minus 60 dB. Again, just a quality of tape. If you want to bring that in, it's a parameter here, and simply turning that on or off. And hiss, if you want to add some tape hiss into your signal, go to town, just turn that on. Unless you find yourself filtering it out later, well, you can keep it off. So let's go through the transport controls. By the way, my favorite thing is this. I can do that all day. All right, so if we continue on here in the transport controls, you actually have two different formulas of tape you can use. When to use each one? Well, here's a tip really with any plugin is look at your presets. Now, I never recommend just finding a preset, let's say for bass guitar, turning it on and calling it a day. Absolutely not. But looking at presets is actually a good way to educate yourself about the plugins because these are suggestions from the developers. This is how they envision people using their plugins. Now, as developers often do, is they're listening to their users and seeing how people are using their plugins. But as a starting point, it's a good way to see what the developers are thinking when they developed the plugin in the first place. So if we go into Mixbus, for example, it's recommending using Formula 2. Let's just go through the list here. On drums, for some reason, it's saying using Formula 1. So try each one, hear what your ear tells you, and you have two different formulations. And bypass, you've got the power switch. Depending on what DAW you're in, there will be a way to turn off the plugin, obviously there, but the plugin also includes a power button here, so you can bypass the plugin if you're looking to compare your before and after. And one other thing I want to draw your attention to is this link button at the bottom. You can actually link instances of the plugin throughout your project, so certain parameters will remain constant throughout all of the different plugins. You can also separate them if that's what you want to do. So if you want some consistency throughout your project with multiple instances, you can use the global link function to do that. All right, and really that's it. It's a simple plugin. You just play around with it and see what you come up with. I'm going to take you through a couple of different examples of what you can do with a plugin, and so you can hear for yourself what Flywheel does. In this first example on drums, Flywheel seems to be adding some nice air to the drum track. There's a nice pleasing distortion in the kick drum, and the whack of that snare drum really cuts through. In this second example, I'm using Flywheel to bring some presence to the guitars. It's removing a lot of mud and really bringing those guitars forward. lastly, I'm using Flywheel on the master bus. It's a great tool to give your mix that last little bit of polish and inject a little bit of extra life and shine into your mix. Well, there you have Flywheel from Fuse Audio Labs. What a great saturation plugin it is. I love tape plugins. I mean, if you gave me only 4 plugins to use, I'm certain I'm going to have a compressor, I'm going to have an EQ, probably need a reverb, but I definitely think I'd put a tape saturation plugin there. And this is definitely a very useful plugin to use. It's subtle when it needs to be, and if you really want to push it, you can really get some really dirty distortion out of it. But for me, where I found it really shone was just doing that last little bit of cleanup on a track, creating a little clarity, warming up the bottom end, and just tightening up the track a little bit. And Flywheel really did its job. As I say with any plugin, try before you buy. Fuse Audio Labs does offer 14-day free trials on all of their plugins. So I'm going to put a link in the description so you can check it out for yourself. If you do get your hands on it and have some thoughts, would love to hear what you have to say. Just drop it into the comment box below, and I'll do my best to respond, especially if you have any questions. Well, if you're new to the channel, I hope I've earned a subscribe. I've got a lot of videos on this channel geared to the home studio enthusiast and the home recording musician, so hopefully you'll click that subscribe button and come along for the ride. If you really want to support this channel, I am on Patreon. Links to everything I've discussed are in the description below. And above all else, I hope I'll see you again in another video. As always, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And please like, subscribe, and ring that bell to stay up to date. Remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. There are a lot of great musical projects you can do by yourself, right from your own home. I hope to see you again next time.